appreciate the smattering of
Yeah.
applause. I know we're standing between you all and lunch, but this is the most important topic of the day. And I say that because every time I go to a meeting, actually even in the last administration and this administration, we hand them a report and we have all these battery metals, lithium, cobalt, nickel, and they always say like, where's copper? So maybe we can just start the conversation by saying, why is copper so important? Where do we stand, and why is this such a threat, or why every administration sees it as the most important thing we need to worry about?
Well, sure. First of all, Robbie, thanks very much for the invitation to be here. It's great to be here to talk about the importance of copper. And we were talking backstage. I made the comment that one of the great things about copper is it's passionately bipartisan. So no matter what your particular priority is, whether when you talk about growth in the economy, growth in infrastructure, technology advancement, retooling our military, copper plays a critical role in almost every aspect of our economy. And so when we talk about critical metals, and it's hard to think of a metal that is more critical than copper. It plays such a large volume role in electricity generation and transmission and all types of infrastructure components. And so I've spent the last, give or take 20 years in the natural resources industry and specifically with copper. And so we're just quite excited at Ivanhoe Electric to have an advanced copper project in Arizona on private land to help meet the growing demand for copper domestically. So domestic demand growth in the United States is projected to almost double in the next 10 years. And globally, we're looking at a world that needs twice the copper that it has today in the next sort of 25 years. So we think this is the right metal and the right place to be.
Yeah, I think I've heard that we're going to have to mine more copper in the next whatever, like 25, 30 years than we have in human history.
Yeah, one of the neat statistics, and we're an industry full of statistics, but in the history of human civilization, we've produced roughly 700 million tons of copper. From today, over the next 20 to 25 years, just to maintain 3% GDP growth globally, we need another 700 million tons of copper production. And that's hard to get your head around. Current refined copper demand globally is just under 27 million tons. And several industry projections suggest that by 2050, we'll need about 50 million tons of production. So round numbers, you're talking about almost 1 million tons of new production every year from now until 2050 to meet global demand.
And maybe where do we get the copper from for the United States? Maybe where do we process that for the United States? Maybe give some perspective about how the market shakes out if you're America.
Yeah, so currently the United States consumes just under 10% of global copper consumption. We import about 40% of our refined copper metal. So we've got great mining companies in the US who produce a good bit of copper, but a lot of that copper comes in the form of concentrate versus copper cathode. At Ivanhoe Electric, our project in Arizona, about an hour south of the Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport, is a high-quality, high-grade underground resource that's capable of producing pure copper cathode on site. We expect to leach this ore and produce copper cathode on site, which allows us to deliver refined metal into a domestic market to meet domestic demand.
Before we get to that project, to the project and your exploration, I'll ask you this question. I'll give you my thesis afterwards. We didn't talk about this before. The Biden administration didn't really put copper on the critical minerals list, yet I talked about how they were very focused on it and thought it was really important. The Trump administration has now a tariff. We're going to have a tariff on copper, and be put on the list, like copper itself. What is your, or unless you know, what is your thesis for why, again, we talk about it, but the Biden administration was hesitant, the Trump administration is not?
Well, certainly, look, I think you go back to the Inflation Reduction Act from the previous administration. It was certainly a positive development to start the dialogue about critical metals. Certainly, copper was on one list for the Department of Energy, but was not on the Department of Interior list. That created some confusion for our industry. about what.
We call it listomania after that song. Everyone has their own list.
Yes, it's a lot of lists. So that was certainly, I think, the first step in raising awareness for the importance of critical metals to the U.S. economy and the importance of domestic sources of supply for those metals. What we're most encouraged by in this current administration and the level of activity and the level of action is what it can mean for really fast-tracking projects and fast-tracking the development of domestic resources to meet domestic needs. And so, when the executive order came out from the Trump administration, that removes all the ambiguity about who's on what list. Copper's square in the middle of that executive order. It's incredibly important, it's incredibly positive to our industry, not just our company, but to our industry, to promote faster permitting, faster discovery of new sources of metal, and faster development of these projects that can bring domestic metal to bear for domestic, to meet domestic demand. So we're just very excited about the current environment and the current administration and the level of, the high profile nature of discussion around critical metals.
Yeah, I mean, my thesis is that besides your project on private land, which is quite important, the other three major projects are all quite controversial politically. Whether you're in Arizona and there's this, with the indigenous religious rights and the Supreme Court case, Minnesota, with the lakes, the environment, or up in Pebble in Alaska. The minute you put it on the list, it's hard to say, well, we shouldn't do it. And I think that, that's my thesis. Like, the three most important, very important projects are there. So you didn't have to say that, I did. So tell us about Ivanhoe. Like, okay, so let's leave the mine for a second. We'll get back to that. But like, what else do you do? I think there's some really important stuff. Your Typhoon technology, that would be really helpful to hear.
Well, Robbie, as you know, we were founded by our executive chairman, Robert Friedland, who has an incredible track record of value creation, technology innovation, and sort of entrepreneurship in the mining industry. And when Robert brought Ivanhoe Electric public in the United States in the summer of 2022, the thesis was really to bring technology-driven exploration to find and develop new sources of critical metals with a focus on copper in the United States. So we were really created to do exactly what we're talking about in today's environment. So it's another example of Robert being, sort of ahead of his time and thinking about being in the right place at the right time with the right company. So we do have this proprietary exploration technology package that I would categorize as sort of a hardware and software combination. The hardware component is called Typhoon. It's a very powerful ground-based geophysical surveying system capable of performing both electromagnetic and induced polarization surveying. And again, ground-based, so non-invasive. And we pair that with our proprietary, very powerful software subsidiary called Computational Geosciences. We own 94% of Computational Geosciences. It's based in Vancouver, Canada. And CGI has a very powerful machine learning-based software package that takes the raw data from Typhoon and creates very accurate 3D images of the underground geophysical anomalies that Typhoon identifies. And what makes Typhoon so special is through 20 years of research and development by Robert's private company, iPulse, which is in France, we've got a series of very powerful and bespoke capacitors and switches that are a derivative of the pulse power technology that iPulse has been pursuing. It allows us to put a very powerful and very clean signal into the ground. So we run a Typhoon survey. We put out almost 60 kilometers of cable at any given time that run a distance of almost 10 kilometers or 6 miles away from the Typhoon machine. Allows us to see across very broad areas of land to great depths very quickly. So we're able to get accurate imagery from, in some cases, up to 1.5 kilometers of depth. So order of magnitude, 2 to 3 times the depth of what you might get from competing geophysical surveying technology. And the machine learning component of this with CGI allows us to continually improve and increase the speed and accuracy of the survey. So we're now getting turnaround time on surveys of almost 24 hours. And when I joined the company at the end of 2022, that same survey was taking 6 to 8 weeks to get inversions on. So our Our thesis is to have technology-driven exploration to help find and locate and develop new sources more quickly.
It's I'm always surprised, when they say like, oh, some archaeologists like I found some temple. I'm like, wait, haven't we looked there before? Should they, or like mines, like, oh, we found this massive deposit we didn't know. But of course, the Earth's very large. So maybe give us a sense of like how much unexplored area we have in the United States, or using this new technology, what we thought might be there. And then I'll have a follow-up, which is, okay, so everyone wants to rush to mine right now. We want everything right now, versus the idea of maybe stepping back, going a little slower because there's new exploration. People don't talk about exploration, as much. Oh, we must know everything in the United States. We've been here. So I guess put exploration and its importance, its time sensitivity versus just moving like fast forward now, and then broadly speaking, just how much more where is the United States in this idea of what we know we already have?
Well, first of all, we should do both. We should fast track projects, and we should allocate more resources to exploration, because we do have to find new sources to meet future demand. The mining industry is embracing technology. You read a lot about new leaching processes to leach waste piles and access copper that's sitting in waste dumps, and that's important. But that's not going to meet the massive growth and demand that we talked about earlier. We need to find new sources. We need to develop the sources that we know exist today. One of Robert's theses when he brought the company public is that the U.S. is underexplored vastly for critical metals, including copper, particularly in the southwestern United States around Arizona, where we're based. Arizona's produced around 10% of the world's copper over its history, a very prolific mining state. But almost all of the mining operations in Arizona were discovered through surface representations of mineralization at these, the surface of these basin and range areas. Well, beneath the cover, those ranges exist, those mountain ranges exist underground. We believe, but using Typhoon to look deep beneath the Earth's surface, that we should be able to locate new sources of copper that mimic the surface representations that led to some of the world's great mines and some of the U.S. great mines in Arizona. So we think the U.S. is underexplored. We think we have the right technology to do that exploration work. We think the southwestern United States is a great opportunity for that. We recently announced an exploration alliance with the world's largest mining company, BHP. They've provided $15 million. We've got a joint exploration alliance. We're 50-50 in our activities, and we're doing early stage exploration in the southwest U.S. with BHP to look for new sources of copper and other critical minerals. So we're excited about the opportunity to find new sources in the United States.
And I think that's one of the first times a major company has worked with a junior just in the exploration, not just buying their assets.
It's an exceptional opportunity for us. BHP is a great partner. We've got a great relationship with them throughout the organization, and it is a unique opportunity where we're working together and using their financial resources with our technology to do joint exploration activities.
You also have a partnership with Saudi Arabia, and maybe talk about that.
We do.
And just Saudi Arabia's move into this space.
Yeah, and I'll do that quickly. I have about a minute and a half left, but we've got
I have all the time in the world.
You're the boss, right? So we have an incredible joint venture with the Saudi Arabian mining company Ma'aden, and we announced that joint venture in 2023. Ma'aden invested $127 million into our company for a 9.9% stake. We reinvested half of those proceeds into the exploration joint venture to fund exploration activities, and also to purchase 3 new generation Typhoon machines for use by the joint venture. We're currently exploring in the kingdom. Ma'aden contributed access to 48,500 square kilometers of underexplored area on the Arabian Shield in Saudi Arabia. To put that in context, that's a little bit bigger than the country of Switzerland. So we've got a vast land package that we're working with Ma'aden to explore for copper, gold, nickel, and other important metals. And Saudi Arabia has been very vocal about its focus and its desire to make mining a third pillar of its economy as part of its Vision 2030. And we're very honored and excited to be Ma'aden's partner and to look for new metals in the kingdom. And again, on a 50-50 partnership basis, we actually operate that joint venture during the exploration phase. As we find new deposits to develop, Ma'aden will take over ownership of any mining opportunities.
Wouldn't it suck if they had all the oil and now they have all the copper? No, you don't have to answer
They're
that.
gonna have a lot- they're gonna
I
have a lot
wanted
of
to
metal.
say that.
They're gonna have a lot of metal.
You don't have to answer that. They're a great partner. I guess my question, let's talk about your site very briefly. Like, what's so important about it? Why is it different? And what's it going to do for the United States?
When you think about the United States copper market and you scan the universe of projects, when you think about, we're a United States company that owns a project in private land in Arizona in a very mining-friendly state that's produced, like I mentioned, 10% of the world's copper. We're an hour south of the Phoenix International Airport. Our site has excellent access to rail, water, power, natural gas, educated workforce. I mean, this is right outside the city of Casa Grande. We've got a very high-grade deposit. We've at an advanced stage of engineering. We're going to publish our final engineering report in June of this year, so just in a couple of months. And at that point, we'll be, well on our path to having a permitted and financed project in early 2026 to begin construction of a project that can produce pure copper cathode here in the U.S. So when you think about what the Trump administration is trying to accomplish to incentivize and promote U.S. production of refined copper, we couldn't be in a better position than we are today. So we're really excited to work together to advance our project.
Yeah, I guess in some ways my last question is, give a sense of like, okay, so you say we're in our final stage before and we'll be permitted. Just how much does that cost, right? I mean, so people are making a bet on something that's under this ground, and just scale of money.
So our project at Santa Cruz is a nice sized project. It's got the capability to produce 75 to 80,000 tons of copper per year. So that's around 160 plus million pounds of copper per year. That would make it a top 4 copper producing mine in the U.S. So it's a very good project. It's important that it's also high grade copper. Our known resource is about a little over 1.24% average copper. So that's very high grade for the U.S. It's an underground mine. We'll move about 20,000 tons a day from underground. Our resource starts at about 450 meters of depth and goes down to about 800 meters of depth. So it's a underground mining operation, medium scale. Our initial assessment we put out in 2023 had an initial estimate of project capital of about $1.2 billion. So that kind of gets to your question of capital intensity. This is $1.2 billion of initial capital to produce 75,000 tons.
But to get there, how much did it cost? How much have you spent to get there?
Oh, we spent order of magnitude over $100 million just on the
hoping that
just on the test
there.
work, the infill drilling, the metallurgical testing, the hydrogeological testing to understand where the water is underground, rock conditions, processing, et cetera. So it's a very capital intensive project, to bring a mine just to this engineering phase. So, but we're at the right place at the right time with this type of project.
That's really exciting. I guess one thing I'll just sort of end with is I was listening to Robert. I was at a conference with him a few weeks ago, and actually he said something interesting. I don't know if anyone's ever brought this up, but you can no longer do any mining in places you need to be somewhere that's dry. And I think that's really interesting. That's why you go to the southwest of the United States. I don't know if you'll comment on that.
It's very dry in Arizona, I can say that.
And why is it important that you're in a dry place? Because of the water?
Well, when Robert talks
rains.
about that, he's referencing tailings. So that's from a mining operation that would produce concentrate. And the project that we're contemplating, that we're going to have in Arizona, one of the trade-off studies that we're pursuing and that will likely be in our PFS, our preliminary feasibility study that comes out in June, is the potential to do 100% of our production through a process called heap leaching, where you take the ore out of the ground, you crush it once, you put it on a leach pad, and you precipitate a solution through that pad to remove the copper. That process does not require tailings. So we take half of our waste rock, mix it with concrete, put it back underground to limit the surface
Because
footprint.
the tailings, you don't want rainy
The
places.
tailings, you don't want rain because you don't want the tailings to become unstable. We've seen some really disastrous.
Almost impossible, and I for sure in an industrialized country that they would, want to put tailings out there. My last thing, a comment I'll make, you can either comment on it or not, but we have a crowd that's not always miners that I find interesting, and this is something that I think people don't really understand. You're talking about grade, And, just, you read all these reports, there's how much copper we have, there's how much lithium we have, there was ever, but, there's just such different grades.
Yep.
And just because you have something doesn't mean it's the right thing, or if it's a lower grade, it's going to cost you more to get out and everything else. And I think that's something that's so missing. And I think in the Trump administration, first of all, there's a lot of people aren't in place, but even when they are in place, they're not mining experts. So there's like, oh, we got that, but it's not feasible based on its grade just because you have it. And I think that's something that's so nuanced and difficult for policymakers to truly understand.
Well, it's very important because what we're seeing in the global copper industry is a declining of grades at the world's largest copper producing mines. So you hear a lot about grade degradation. Large world scale discoveries are rare. So from the supply side, we've got existing mines that are depleting production. We need to make more new discoveries. And so what you read a lot about is some of the expansion projects in brownfield operations are incredibly capital intensive. And without naming specific names, you see brownfield projects that have a capital intensity of $35,000+ a ton of production. And that's really driven by grade. You're talking about expanding production at operations that have copper grades of less than 1/2%. And so when we're talking about a project that has average grade north of 1%, our rock is worth twice as much. So a ton of our rock is worth twice as much as a ton of rock that's less than 0.5%. So the economics are better.
Got it.
So the projects are better. So
that's amazing. I mean, the last thing I'll say is, Typhoon is such an amazing invention. We're going to have so much copper that maybe we'll bring back the penny. We'll make it out of copper, and then we won't have to get rid of the penny forever, which actually is the one thing the Trump administration did. I'm totally supportive of getting rid of the penny. But you don't have to answer that either.
That plays out.
Everyone should have an enjoyable lunch. Thank you so much. We'll see you here in an hour.
Thank you very much.